Zombie Hunter, how you doing? I just heard you.
Good, thanks. Sorry, I had to rush to the other room and
You're
get
good.
some
How you doing?
different headset. Good.
So, what do you want to debate?
I just wanted to talk to you about something you actually already spoke about.
Sure. What you
You
got
uh,
for me?
you have a video on your channel speaking to an ANCAP
That's correct.
about racism and how the market doesn't solve that. I'm
Yes.
not an ANCAP, but I would like to speak about that.
Sure. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So as far as I understand, and I'm not American, but I have done some research on this. That the situation described as a complete opposite. That
Really?
yeah, that the race laws, there were laws from the government, or from the state, sorry, in the South that separated people intentionally and had to like have different cafes and stuff like that. And for example, Rosa Parks, when she was sitting on, I hope I'm getting the right context here. When she was sitting on the bus in the wrong place, uh, the bus driver would have gotten in trouble had he not asked her to get up and sit at the back. And if it was up to the market, then it would be too expensive to have this sort of thing. And an example would be trains. So trains had to have different carriages for black and white. But because it was far too expensive, they just gave up on it outright.
Do you remember the example that I presented in that ANCAP argument?
Remind me?
Yeah. So there's actually a vested interest in order to preserve racism. So, and there was actually logical market conclusions to that. So most people in the South were not black, but there were black people. It was also considered as low class to be sitting next to a black person in, say, a restaurant, right? It was like seen as like as a ghetto, effectively. And so, because 80% of your clientele is white, there was a vested interest in making sure that blacks stay separated from the whites in the South. Or
I
in some
think
areas, they would just kick them out entirely. They would just be like, no, we're a high class establishment. You can't be here. You're black. Right. And so the end result is entirely through market forces, black people get excluded.
I sorry. Are you done? I don't wanna interrupt in the middle.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I haven't heard this argument like outside this sort of hypothetical. It could very well be the case that some nightclubs wanted to be more exclusive, or some restaurants wanted to be more exclusive, but that's like a tiny minority of the overall
Most
market.
restaurants.
And if you look at this is basically the argument.
But even so, this is just restaurants, right? There's other areas where people were excluded, right?
If I can just make the point. The idea with capitalism, you may be familiar with this, is that the government basically needs to protect your rights or your property, so that they don't get violated or you don't get violated. No threat is made against you. And the premise is that if you have those sorts of protections, then eventually, even if you're an immigrant, even if you're hated, you will eventually be fine. And there's an example with Jamaican immigrants after the 1910, I think, that they came in, and then by the 1970, I think this is like second generation, they're already doing better than the local white population. So even if you are hated, as long as you have these protections, you'll be fine. And I can give an example. If you use the example with Milton Friedman, if someone sells you a piece of bread or sells you a pencil, there's so many people going into the process of making that for you. if one of those people happen to be black, you can't know that. You still want the bread, you still want the pencil, even if like 1/10 of the process was done by a black person. You can't discriminate, and if you choose to, you'll have to look for like a pencil that definitely 100% wasn't made by a black person. That's very difficult, and it's more expensive, and you get punished.
I
for that.
I
You have to pay a
understand the
premium.
raw argument, but that's not what ended up happening in real life.
Real life was the example I just gave you of Jamaican immigrants.
I mean, there could be an example of that, but the point is that black people do get excluded from society by having a racist notion. That's why it's really important to have the Civil Rights Act so that more people are free.
I see. So I have two problems with this. I obviously I don't have a problem with black people having more opportunities, but would you say that this is a sort of attack on liberalism, because you are essentially saying you shouldn't think bad thoughts, or you shouldn't think bad thoughts in the context that it may deprive someone else of an economic opportunity?
What is liberalism to you?
Individual rights.
Which includes
Right to property, right to
life, liberty,
certain freedoms,
pursuit
right
of
to
property.
life. Yeah.
Happiness. Yeah.
That's the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only thing that would stop me from pursuing my happiness is someone using force on me.
Well, I'm thinking about this for a second, right?
Okay.
I don't see how we are protecting the life, liberty, and property of individuals if the society deems it okay to be discriminatory towards these people.
Well, I gave you already a real life example where even if people were discriminated
That's great,
against,
but that still means black people are excluded. We can come up with dozens of examples of this.
okay, so we
Right?
should.
The point is that blacks don't get the same opportunities as whites.
I don't know if that's the case in America. In the UK,
That's absolutely
They
the
do.
case in America.
okay.
It was only until very recently that blacks have roughly the same opportunities as whites. But even then, that's still pretty shaky under the basis that we had redlining laws in the past that relegated a bunch of minorities into ghetto areas, which meant that they went to worse schools because schools are funded entirely through property taxes. And if you're in a ghetto area, the value of the homes are lower. And considering we get our property taxes through percentages, that means there's less money going to the school. So people right from the get-go, they end up with a worse quality of living outcome because their education isn't funded as much.
Why I'm gonna have to disagree
That's
on
in
that
fact
because
true in 2024,
education's
right?
actually-
Because I can go down any Martin Luther
Education-
King Avenue throughout the entirety of the United States. You will find it is a majority of black people, and that wasn't by accident. Do you understand?
Okay, so if you double the amount of money that schools receive in those areas, would they get a better education? Because they do get quite a lot of money currently.
What?
If you double the
Not
amount of
according
money,
to not according to property rights. No.
sorry, if
That's
you
still a
if you're
problem
talking about
today.
education, if you're talking about education, is lack of money the issue why poor kids from certain areas aren't doing as well? Is that the problem?
Repeat that. What?
Is lack of money from taxes, let's say, from property taxes, the issue why kids or minority kids are doing worse in their educational outcomes, meaning their ability
That's
with
a
English
huge
and their
portion,
ability
yeah.
with math?
That's a huge
Well,
portion. Yes.
That's not what the data shows.
What does the data show?
Well, I've actually researched this, and I've also spoken with some teachers, and they said that a huge difference is how much time the parents spend with the kids and how much they ask them.
That's also a factor.
That's the largest factor.
Sure. So I would imagine if people are poorer, they have less time to spend time with their kids and teach them. Sure. So don't you think that we should probably have
not necessarily
decent funding towards tutors and
not
after-school
necessarily
programs in these schools?
you're running off in a particular direction. Not necessarily teach them, but have like aspirations that they do their homework, that they go to school, that they behave properly, that they try to achieve a good grade. That's what's kind of perhaps missing. Again, I'm not in America to know definitively. It's just from my research. But yeah, those are the parental involvement is a huge factor in that.
Okay, none of that is antithetical to what I said.
You're saying that the main reason is lack of money.
I didn't say it's the main reason. I said it's a big reason.
Okay, so
you
I don't want to
understand, like,
I don't want to harp on this.
If your parents, right, didn't go to college and that they didn't get a higher education because they went to crappy schools, the probability of them valuing higher education is lower.
If the kids worked very well, even if they had a poor beginning, would they still be able to succeed? Is the question.
Sure, that's possible, but the probability is lower.
Because why? Because the minorities?
Because the parents didn't get a higher education. They don't value higher education as much.
So if a Jamaican immigrant, the parents did not have a higher education, but the parents still value higher education very much and push the child to do well at school, despite them not having a higher education, would that increase the probability of the child having a higher education?
Child? Yes, it would if they were encouraged to go into higher education. But if you didn't go into higher education, there is a much higher probability that you would not value higher education. It also doesn't help in the fact that if somebody is poor, this also increases their probability of going straight to work as opposed to like going to college. I mean, this is beyond the pale. The point that I'm trying to make is that we've had lots of racist laws that existed in the past that result into the negative outcomes that we observe today in 2024.
Oh, I agree. Like, racist laws are very negative. If it comes from the state, it's absolutely negative.
Okay, so then what's your argument?
And education is also from the state, if I'm correct, in the US.
All right, what's your argument?
Well, that the state is causing issues for minorities or taking away opportunities for minorities, either with laws that you've mentioned or with the education that is not providing very well.
So do you think did the state push for the Civil Rights Act?
No, people pushed for the Civil Rights Act.
Really?
Yeah.
So I agree with you in terms of like, you have Martin Luther King and all sorts of other people that pushed for it, and then the government did something about it. They codified it into law.
Okay, so can I just go like a few steps back just to this particular point, not the poverty specifically, but to this specific point? Do you think that if sorry, so I asked this question again. I'm not sure what the answer was. Do you remind me what you said about if we reduce individual rights in the way that I mentioned that, you cannot think bad thoughts about other people if it removes economic opportunities from them.
You can't do anything about legislating a thought crime, but I would absolutely very much be in favor of regulating people from being discriminatory to minorities. Absolutely.
Okay, so that's a yes. So can I just, around the area of liberalism, I'm gonna ask questions that it seems very far apart, but it's around the area of individual rights. So I take it you believe, in quotation, in climate change. Yeah, you agree that it's happening. Yeah. Just a quick question.
Where is this going?
Individual rights, still around the subject of individual rights.
Yes, climate change is happening. That's not really a controversial thought.
Great. So would you say that we cannot let people just open their own business and do whatever they like because they can do something that pollutes the planet and hurt everyone on it? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they should be held accountable for when they make damage to the planet. Sure.
Not held accountable. We have to regulate them so they don't do it to begin with.
What? No, you can
We have to
you can do
prevent them from
things.
taking-
You can do things to help regulate or mitigate pollution on Earth.
Okay, so we can't let people just open a business willy-nilly because it can result in other people being hurt, right? So
That's
we need
correct.
to reduce individual rights from this direction as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And what about like what people do in the bedroom? Should we regulate that as well?
What are they doing in the bedroom?
Yeah. If people
I'm
do
of the
things
belief that if somebody is not hurting anybody, right, and
Okay.
it's between consenting adults, do whatever you want. I really don't care. I'm not going to yuck.
okay,
your
what
yum.
if what if it's between a brother and sister or two cousins and them having a
Yeah,
child?
I mean, gross, but I mean, again, I'm not.
Okay.
I don't see
Ro-
a reason to police that. It just seems kind of silly.
Hold on. Them having a child would mean would have a high chance of deformity.
Uh-huh.
So we have communities around the world, cultures around the world, that marry their cousins in the UK as well, and have a 40-something% chance of having like some sort of deformity or some sort of disability. The child, sorry, will born with some sort of disability. If it is the case that being in the bedroom in this particular context result in someone else being hurt, should be regulated. Should we reduce individual rights in this area as well?
No, because and the reason why is I'm trying to think about what society looks like under one condition versus the other, and it's like when I am thinking about this already, society kind of takes care of this in the sense of like there's a level of like social ostracism that occurs. I think like involving the government in those private rights, in those private matters between two consenting adults, I think it like the society ends up looking worse as a result. You don't actually have to have a regulation in order to make sure that people don't like have like commit sexual intercourse with their sister or whatever and have a baby.
We have entire communities in the UK and in the US. I'm going to assume that have high rates of children with deformities or disabilities that then need the state or society to step up and pay for the rest of their life for these kids to already. I'm not gonna say like
I'm not
should
aware
never
of
be
a
born or
giant
something.
this giant
Yeah,
thing that you're
I'm just-
talking about. Maybe this is a thing in the UK. It's not really a thing in the, I mean, maybe you can think about people
No,
who are
it is
in Alabama in the United States, but like that's still a stunning minority of people.
No, it's millions and millions of people. Any so, for example, Pakistanis have these issues in the communities, and if you carry a child, okay, if a child is born, sorry, and they have these problems, society then has to pay for that.
0.2% of American marriages are inbred, and it's 250,000 Americans.
Okay, should we just regulate the inbred or the Pakistani communities, or like educate them that this is not good for your children? Try not to do that.
Education would be a good start. Sure.
And should we say like when they apply for marriage certificates that no, you can't marry your cousin?
Seems fair.
So we're regulating who they can marry.
Sure, some level. Yeah. I mean, you've exhibited some sort of, negative harm there that's pretty substantial, so fair enough.
I mean, I'm just saying that I can always find an excuse to reduce individual rights, and at some point we're not becoming a liberal democracy. We're moving away from a liberal democracy to an illiberal democracy, because and I think that's important. And if
how so?
Even with the example of should we regulate the bedroom? Obviously, someone like yourself and myself as well, we're not comfortable regulating people, the bedroom of people, because they should be able.
That's most liberals under only extreme circumstances like what you presented, where it would be necessary, right? And it's basically
but
at the
I can
harm
always
of
find.
individuals.
I can always find such examples. We can always sit here and hypothetically come up with things to reduce people's individual rights. Should we not like have a line and say, no, this is, we should either let the market handle these things, or we should just not intervene in these sorts of things, or
We've
should
already
I just here
discussed
make a
this.
hypothetical?
Why are you going back on it?
What did we discuss? Sorry.
You discussed the regulating marrying your cousin.
No, I'm it's not that I'm serious about doing it. I'm just giving you examples how I can hypothetically make you agree to reduce people's individual rights.
Okay.
I can sit here and give you example, and you'll agree to every single one till we slowly erode people's individual rights.
Okay, so like
That's a bad thing.
do you think that there's?
Would you agree?
Do you think that there's that there ought be regulations on people?
You mean in general? Is that the
Yeah.
argument? Like we go from one extreme to the other?
Well,
Could
no,
we
I
just stay in this
mean
vein?
you said
Could
that
we
it's
stay
a
in this
bad
vein?
it's a bad thing to do these things. And so then
Okay.
my question, okay, if you believe it's bad, therefore it is logical to assume that you consider regulations bad. And so therefore ought not do it. Right? That's your ought statement. And so then my
So
question
I can
becomes,
have
ought we have regulations on people? Are there any regulations that you would consider to be good?
I'm happy. Okay, I'll answer this question, but before I do, I just want to say that the context of the conversation was that I'm concerned that if more and more people just hack away at individual rights, we'll move away from a liberal democracy to an illiberal democracy, because we can
I disagree
always...
completely, and I'm explaining to you that there's kind of a middle ground here, right? There's a line
Pragmatic
where it
middle ground, yeah.
exists, and it doesn't have to keep going indefinitely. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, so let's talk about regulation. Would you say that once a regulation is written,
I want you to answer my question,
lasts
because I
forever?
answered many of your questions, and I'm just asking you to please answer mine.
Sure, I would say that we should protect people's individual rights. So if, for example, let's take a parent abusing their child. So if for example, a parent
Okay, so there are good regulations then.
No, I'm explaining. If a parent abuses their child, we should protect the rights of the child. That's one kind. A regulation is not that. A right, sorry, is if someone violated your rights, then you have to prove they are guilty, and then the state can do something. So it's innocent until proven guilty. A regulation is the opposite. There's a government agency saying you can't do this, or before you do this, you have to get permission from us, or you have to get some sort of certificate. So you have to prove that you're not going to do something, and then you can do something. So it's guilty, and you have to prove you're innocent. That's how I distinguish between the two.
So you can stop right there, because you're already contradicting yourself. You said earlier that by creating a regulation, this creates an illiberal democracy, but yet you are perfectly okay with certain regulations, which means, but you do not consider it to be your idea to be an illiberal democracy. So why am I any different?
How am I? So I've spoken.
You just
about
came up
individual
with
rights this whole time.
regulations regarding on whether or not that a parent can abuse their child, which in turn would be a regulation from the United States government. And so, under that basis, could I simply say the same exact argument that you made towards me, saying that I am in favor of an illiberal democracy because I am in favor of regulations which are bad?
So it is not a contradiction, because my example was individual rights of the child being protected, and regulation would be a restriction on the parent from doing something before it happens.
Let me ask you this. Should we have regulations on food, for instance?
I think the market handles that very well, actually.
Really?
Better than... Yeah,
You sure about that?
absolutely. 100%. Would you
Why
like
do
me
you
to prove
think
it?
we have the Food and Drug Administration? Do you think that they just kind of twiddle their thumbs?
So the thing is, with the Food and Drug Administration, I believe the reason why it came around was either So again, I'm not
Do you
American.
think it could
but
have anything to do with the fact that it's very easy for someone to get sick from food?
Sure. But why do you
So
think that
why not
cannot
have a
be?
regulation around that?
Why do you think that standard of good quality food cannot be implemented in the market?
What? Because people are super neglectful. Sometimes it requires a really, really annoying government that constantly checks on a restaurant to make sure that, for example, they're not like, there's so many regulations. Like, are you storing cleaning product next to food that is eaten? That's a big problem.
Right. So my
Is your kitchen free of bugs and rats?
But fantastic. My
Well,
question
I'm
is,
saying, like, these
can
are
the market
regulations. Are
do-
you okay? Are you okay with these kinds of regulations? It's
My
like
question-
basic
my question is,
safety
can-
measures.
my question is, can the market provide these basic safety measures, or does it have to be the government?
I mean, the problem is that the market doesn't always do that.
It does.
Okay, all right. So here's the thing, right?
Can I give you an example?
No, I already know exactly what's going to happen here, right? Because
Okay,
your
what
argument
does-
is
what
going
was I gonna
to
say?
let me get this straight, right? Your argument is likely. I'm just correct me if I'm wrong, by the way. That
Okay.
when a restaurant serves food or bad quality food, they go out of business, right? Because they're serving bad food.
Not my point. Not
right,
not the
go
point
ahead.
I was going to make. So this is the same in the UK and in the US. Supermarkets have a very, very high level of standard for the food that they sell, because if like they sell something, it has mold on it, or it's bad, people will complain to the supermarket, and they'll tell their friends, and the supermarket will hurt their brand name, or lose a lot of money because it spreads around the community. So in both the UK and the US, there are these government inspectors that come into third-party suppliers and check, like, if meat is sitting on the floor in the sun, or if there's something, and then come the inspectors from the supermarkets, and it's like 10 times harder. And I would think even, and it's just, it scales the third-party suppliers half to death, because it's a very, very high level. Like, there's a nail, there's like a steel nail, it shouldn't be there. You failed. So I would say in those kinds of situations, don't even send the government inspector, because they don't do anything. Just
Because the market will just
the
handle
industry-
itself, right? The don't worry, the restaurant and the grocery store,
I've just
they'll
given you an
they'll
example.
know
You're
what's
being
good for their
cynical-
bottom
you're being
line.
cynical about.
No,
you're being
I'm being
cynical about my
realistic.
example.
It's obvious.
This is a real
it's obvious
example.
not just to me, but to anybody else here who has ever worked
Okay.
food service. They know
Okay.
for a fact that if it were not for health inspectors and if it were not for government regulations, many, many restaurants as well as grocery stores wouldn't give a crap.
But this is factually untrue.
That is not the case.
This is factually untrue.
That is
No one-
100% true. Please,
No one
can
tells the
chat.
supermarket-
Anybody,
no one
literally
tells the
anybody who's worked food service, can someone tell me how wrong this dude is? Can someone tell me? Do you
I just gave you an
honestly
exam-
believe if there were no health inspectors that all of a sudden it would be all a little bit better? Fluffy sitting
I'm
here
not
saying, to be
I'm not
honest, it is
saying-
that way. Dude, there is no
I'm not saying-
self-regulation
I'm not
of
saying
that.
You're misquoting. I'm not saying no health inspector. I'm saying the health inspector comes from the market.
How does that work?
Well, there are standards that so let's take the supermarket example. They want to keep a very high quality of food. They don't mind coming down very hard on the third party suppliers. They hire it's not their own inspector. They hire inspectors to come in and make sure
Why
that
would
the
they
third-party
hire an
suppliers are doing the
inspector? That costs money.
Yeah, but it's worthwhile for them.
I'm saying it costs money. So there's going to be some people that are going to say, oh, I want to spend that money. I want to have a high quality product. And then there's going to be other people that are going to be like, dude, we need to save the money. We're not going to hire an inspector. We just need to pump out some food so we can make some money.
And what would be the consequences of doing that?
They could get a lot of people sick.
Okay.
And they could lose a lot of customers. So, okay, great.
And
they
the
just went out of
customers can sue
business after 3 months of poisoning people. But the problem is that 3 months happened of poisoning people. Do you understand the problem?
I I appreciate that.
I
I'm
don't
just
want to
saying that
wait
you,
for the fucking invisible
yeah.
hand
I don't,
to like be
I
like,
don't want
hey, now that you're done poisoning people for the next 4 months, now all of a sudden, now you got to go out of business. That literally makes no sense.
Thanks for the hysteria. That's not what
It's
I'm
not
saying.
hysteria. It's like
Thanks for the
like
show.
just basic
Thanks
logic.
for the show. It's not what I'm saying. Yeah, I get the basic logic.
So then
But
why are you arguing the
you can have it at the
nonsense?
front of, just like you have with restaurants. This restaurant was inspected, has X stars. You can have that from the market. That's all I'm saying. You can have you can still have the FDA just in the market.
How does that work?
Or more than one FDA.
How does that work?
What is Underwriters Limited? The UL,
I don't know.
The UL sticker you have under most of your electronics.
Okay. What about
That's a private entity. That's a private entity that checks the quality of electronics. Oh, if you have a mouse, flip it over. If you have a mouse, flip it over. Does it have a sticker with UL on it?
Okay. What's your point?
That it's handled in the market, and sometimes the government outsources inspection to them as well.
Okay, so I guess my problem is that one thing regarding one thing when it comes to electronics is that electronics tend to function better when everybody works together. So everybody goes and gets like a standardized measure, so that way that they can establish communication between products, and we know that the products are good, right? That works fine in a market incentive. But that's not necessarily the case for food, right? You don't need to establish a compatibility standard between food. You can have really, really creative differences in how people prepare and create their food. And sometimes people are neglectful. Do you know why? Because people are not, they're not robots. They're not going to be like that. Some people are going to make irrational decisions. Sometimes they will be like, I'm going to cut some corners, which then means that could get a lot of people sick. The electronic is negligible. The only difference with the electronic is that you don't end up with a bunch of sick people. You just end up with some broken electronics and some e-waste, right? Whereas the food can get a lot of people sick very, very quickly and create a giant epidemic that causes huge problems just by cutting corners.
I'm sure we can let our imaginations run wild.
That's not my imagination, dude. There's a reason why the FDA was created.
Let me just get
Oh
out.
my god, dude, you are killing me.
And I'm sure people can cut corners today as well, even with inspectors coming once a month or once a week.
That's correct, but at least there's a mitigating factor. Okay. I'm sitting here pointing out you're talking about something like at the level of car crashes, right? I'm giving you an example. Stop. I'm giving you an example. Can you repeat my position? I'm not going to repeat your position. Calm the fuck down. I know that stupid tactic where if you don't say it perfectly back, that all of us are, you weren't listening, and then you can demonize the entire position. It doesn't matter. So let's say, for example, that you have like cars, and there's like regulatory safety standards or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sitting here arguing seatbelts, and you're like, well, seatbelts. Well, sometimes people don't use seatbelts. I'm like, bro, but having it is better than not.
Who invented seatbelts? Was it the government? Who invented seatbelts? Was it the government?
The government regulated it. Yes, correct.
Who invented seatbelts? Was it the government?
I mean, like in terms of invention, I think it was the private companies, but it was the government that regulated it amongst all car safety standards. So I don't know what your issue is.
Who brought
you understand that I'm not against private industry, but I'm also in favor of like there being reasonable regulations that actually reduce overall death, so that way people can live the life, liberty, and property that you hold so dear?
I am saying that we can have these quality standards. I call them quality standards. We can have these quality standards in the market perfectly fine, or even better than the government is doing it. But can I just ask one important?
So let's
can I just ask for the flip side? Wait, please. I just want to ask for the flip side of this argument. What happens when we have too much regulation?
What? I suppose that there would be negative market externalities. Yes, I agree.
What happens if we have too much regulation?
You can end up with less freedoms and a worse quality of living standard.
How about less economic growth?
That would be a worse quality of living standard. Both of those things are true.
Because I'm in Europe right now. Europe is the powerhouse of regulation.
Yeah, it's also
The
most
Europe
countries
doesn't
in Europe
invent.
also live the highest quality of living standard in the entire world.
Well, that's coming to an end because we haven't made any economic growth since 2008.
That's not the case. There's lots and
That is
lots
the
of people
case.
that do
I
quite
am in Europe.
well.
I'm sure they're doing quite. I'm sure there's some small countries in Northern Europe that are doing quite well.
Most of
But-
Europe does quite well.
Well, it's still a rich.
They have some of the
continent.
highest
However,
HDIs
Oi,
in the entire globe.
Can I get a
Yeah,
sentence?
but you're saying things that are just, you're saying, well, it could go bad in the future. But the reality is that when we have created these regulations, for whatever reason, the quality of living standard is through the freaking roof. And there's
That's not
no
true.
upper bounds. You're
being
postulating
dishonest.
or hypothesizing an
dishonest.
upper bound, but you actually don't know that. I don't know
You're
that
being
either.
dishonest now.
So you're just
You're
making
being-
a hypothesis with no basis in logic or facts.
You're being dishonest, and I don't appreciate.
No,
that.
I'm not being dishonest.
I think you are.
Okay, dude. Do you got anything else for me?
No, can I just finish my point on the issue with Europe because it's important.
Go for it, dude.
Okay, so in Europe is the regulatory capital of the world. There's a saying: Americans innovate, China impersonates or copies. I'm not sure the exact word. And Europe regulates. We have nothing going on. All the tech that America has had for the last 20 some years, we don't even have a presence in tech. All the top companies in Europe richest companies in Europe are car manufacturers, fashion, oil. We have no presence in the most lucrative sector on the planet. Now I'm in the UK. Our healthcare is gone to shit. Our infrastructure has gone to shit. Our roads has gone to shit. Everyone, we're complaining. We have immigrants coming into the country looking for work. Forget what the previous guy said for a second. We have immigrants coming into the country to look for work, and why shouldn't they? And then we have the local people complaining that they don't have enough jobs, or that these people will at some point need welfare, because we are all welfare countries. At some point they're going to need welfare, and we won't be able to provide for them as well. Although taking away from the National Health Service, the NHS, like you go to the NHS, you want to go in line, and there's 20 people in front of you that speak a different language or something. I'm not. It's just an exaggeration, but it's a complaint. The standard, the quality of life real wages has been stagnant since 2010. Real GDP has been stagnant since 2008. At some point, and it's happening right now, we can't afford our health sector. Canada is in a similar situation. Parts of Europe are in a similar situation. I'm sure there are small countries in Northern Europe, like the Nordics, which are still doing well, but they are dependent on the region. So it's not looking pretty. And I think, and a lot of other business people have said as well, that
how many more points are you going to bring up? I'm letting you talk.
I think back to the regulation.
All right. Well, I'm telling you right now, your logic is wrong. You're empirically false here, right? And I'm going to prove you wrong right here, right now.
Go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
So if you observe the HDI in the Human Development Index, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick just so everybody can see it. Hold on one second. Give me a moment. All right. So what I want you to do is I want you to observe this here, where you can actually take a look at the Human Development Index scores. Anything like, around here, very, very, very high quality of living standard. And even like here is also extremely high, right? You will notice almost all of Europe is in these two margins. Very, very, very high quality of living standards. And then if we look down here on the HDI differences in comparison, I'm sorry, here's the very high of 0.8, and this is the change, right? So when you're looking at like these changes mixed with the current standard, it turns out that people are doing better in Europe, not worse. Based on the Human Development Index. Based on the rest of the countries throughout the world. You're sitting there saying that it is the regulation capital of the world. Very well. Maybe it's possible that somehow the quality of living is somehow degrading, yet the data doesn't show that.
I'm saying it's still a rich continent, but it's heading. Okay, let me show you something else.
No,
Maybe this
you're
will help.
hypothesizing because the numbers don't show what you're saying.
Can
Do you
you
understand?
can you take a look at the image I just shared in your chat?
The United Kingdom price changes
Yes.
and then competitive markets versus highly regulated. Do you understand that you really kind of want electricity to be highly regulated?
No, it's not that it's highly regulated. It's we have a very strong green energy policy in Europe, and we attack like fossil fuel production here in the UK in particular.
Yeah.
And as a result, and we try to replace it with wind and solar, but wind and solar hasn't produced either we don't build enough, or wind or solar hasn't produced enough
Yeah, I
energy.
agree. We should put in towards nuclear. Do you got anything else for me?
Right, but I'm just the chart.
Also, you
is
don't
kind
want
of
a
the
private
point.
market for energy. There's a reason why throughout every single developed nation it's
Okay.
nationalized, because the actual
Okay,
risk
can we just-
factors to electricity going down is incredibly high. It is much higher
can
than
we just
people
focus-
think. Without
we
power,
just focus on the
water
whole-
doesn't make it to your house. There does exist infrastructure set up, such as water tanks that are up in the air, so that way when power goes out, you still get water for the next 3 days or so. But anywhere beyond the next 3 days, people start dying. They start dying
but
fast, right? When there's no
thing with-
power.
The thing with the UK is we've got hundreds and hundreds of years of coal under our feet, but we choose not to do anything with it.
You want to use coal?
I mean, if it brings prices down.
So do you see any negative implication of using coal?
Well, we have a negative externality currently. We had
that prices are
last-
expensive. I agree. We should put in towards nuclear.
Yeah,
but the question is, do you see any
but
negative
private-
implications towards using coal?
Yeah, I see negative implications using coal. However,
Yeah, no
we have
shit.
had people die of cold because they were not able to afford heating their house during the winter. 68,000 people across Europe died.
Wait, did you
because of
say
that reason.
coal or cold?
Cold. They died because of cold.
Okay. So
They couldn't
wait, you
turn
weren't
on-
arguing
they
for
were-
coal, in favor of coal?
I'm arguing in favor of fossil fuel that can stabilize the prices for now, because then those people would not have died.
We should put it towards nuclear.
I agree. I'm not
Okay, so
against
then,
nuclear, but until then,
But we should not
As-
we should not be pouring any amount of infrastructure into
Okay.
coal or fossil fuels. It's
Okay,
not
then people will
sustainable.
die.
It puts
Then
you in the
people will
it
die.
puts you in the no, that's not the case.
people will die.
No, that's not the
coal.
case.
That is the case. That
What?
happened
You
already.
invest in nuclear.
Yes, I'm.
And we
happy
already
to-
have,
I'm-
but just so
I'm
you know,
very
we already
pro-nuclear.
have infrastructure for fossil fuels and for coal. The point
Okay,
is that
here's
you
the
don't
fun-
continue building up the thing that's going to literally kill us.
Okay, why don't actually nuclear is a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Why don't we have more nuclear? Because we're still using energy sources basically from the mid 19th century and early 20th century. Why haven't we moved to nuclear fully?
Because
like
people are
really
afraid.
aggressively.
People are afraid.
Sorry?
It's got a bad hype.
So regulation.
Yeah, I mean we've created regulations to
So we
prevent
could
it.
have we
but-
could have solved climate change more or less, like in the same
Well,
way
it's mostly
that France
people's
did.
fear, but the point is that it can be done.
Yeah, so we could
And
have
by
been
the
like France
and just
right
so
now.
you know, there is
regulations
no
stopped
good
us.
there is no good argument for removing regulation for nuclear. You are out of your freaking mind if you think that nuclear
look,
will work
I-
just
who-
fine
who are
in
you
a
arguing
market
with?
environment.
Who are you arguing with? Who are you
You!
arguing? It's not me. I didn't make that argument.
Well, I'm saying.
Who are you
Well, I mean,
arguing with?
do you think that it would go well if you?
Who are you
if you
arguing
did?
with?
I'm
I'm not-
asking
it's
you,
not my
would it go
argument.
well?
All I'm saying is specific factually. Since the U.S. implemented the HR NLC, I think nuclear, NLC, no commercial company has built a nuclear reactor ever in the UK. It's all been the government. And if we regulate it to the same point that France or South Korea are, we could be just fine. It's just not aggressive, super aggressive regulation that practically criminalizes building it. And we could have solved climate change. We're using really, look, capitalism innovates. Let's just agree for a second. Why are we using this ancient technology, ancient energy technology? We could be using something much newer.
Wait, stop. Did the private market find nuclear?
So it was originally the government who invented it in the 1950s.
Oh, okay. The government found it.
Are you also going to tell me that the government discovered the internet and
you
all
understand
the internet
that I'm trying to what I'm trying to argue with you? Do you understand what I'm trying to argue with you is it's more of like a mixed system, and it doesn't matter if it comes from private or if it comes from government. The point is that these things can actually work in synergy, and that's actually what the EU had to. No, but it does. That's unironically how it works. What?
Look,
oh my fucking God! You are killing me, dude.
I'm gonna finish the conversation, but the point is, if you look at the graph with the regulated industries and the less, even the less regulated are a little regulated. So the more regulated ones cost more over time. The less ones cost, like, either stay the same or cost less over time relative to inflation. And that's kind of the point. If we keep hamstringing ourselves, we won't be able. Our cost of living will go up, and then the welfare that you said European countries provide will need to be higher and higher, because once a house costs 4 times more, you need 4 times more welfare to give to people to rent it out, right? So I'm just saying that the market provides for solutions that you're unaware of.
If you think I'm anti-market, I'm not.
Right. So you've just painted me as anti 100%, like
anti-government. Yes, I did paint you that way because you literally you unequivocally admitted to that.
I mean, let me finish my sentence.
But you admitted to that by saying that regulations are bad.
I just said that the market can provide standards for quality. And too much regulation.
Can the government do it? Is it good if the government does it?
The government does it very poorly, unfortunately.
All right, bro. Good talk. You got anything else for me?
Nope.
All right. Whoo. All right.